and thank you for joining Education Buying's webinar today, which is focusing on embedding social value and sustainability in procurement. It is great to see so many of you who are clearly thinking not just about what we buy in education, but about the wider impact of how we spend public money. So today we will be exploring how procurement can move beyond compliance and cost savings and instead become a strategic tool that supports your schools or trusts values on community and long-term environmental goals. So what we'll cover today is why social value and sustainability matter, specifically in education, how to assess and evaluate suppliers effectively, some practical ways to embed these principles into your existing procurement processes, and how to align purchasing decisions with your broader ESG objectives. There will be some time for questions at the end, and we do encourage you to pop those in the chat throughout. So do put any thoughts in there, or if you have any questions, pop them in there. So we're just going to start with a poll question. So hopefully that will pop up on your screen in a second, which is going to ask you about where you want you to think about where your school of trust currently is when it comes to embedding social value and sustainability in procurement. So is it, you might be thinking it's a key part of your procurement strategy. You might consider it in some tenders, or you might be just starting to explore it, or it might be something you've not focused on yet, or you're not sure. Okay, thank you for those who have voted, and that's really helpful to see. And it's quite common for schools to be at different stages. So hopefully today we'll give you some practical ideas, whether you're just starting out or looking to build on what you're already doing. So I'm going to welcome Nathan Swinney to this webinar and hand over to Nathan to take you through.
Good morning, Victoria. Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much. Did you enjoy spring, Victoria? It was yesterday.
It was yesterday, that's it, yes. It's back to clouds.
That's all we're getting, folks. That's it. We're back to cold, rainy. No, let's have some hope. Let's have some hope, shall we? It's a great time of year to be thinking about social value as well, because for many schools and multi-academy trusts, it's this time of year where we're thinking about renewing our contracts, common contracts that start around the beginning of the school year. So September time. So now's the time to be thinking, and it's a great time to be thinking about social value. But first, let's just start with some definitions. What is social value? And I always say you have to buy anyway, so you might as well buy well. So we'll come on to that thought, hold that thought, but let's start with some definitions. So social value refers to wider benefits to communities and society that result from procurements that you run. So in a school context, that could mean things like supporting the local economy, working with local small, medium enterprises, things like providing apprenticeships or work experience, investing in community initiatives, which is one thing that the schools really excel at. You're at the heart of the community, promoting equality and well-being. That's a smattering of what could be quite a lengthy session if we was to do one, at a real top level sort of views to what social value is. But the concept basically is reinforced nationally through something called the Public Services Social Value Act, which is now codified into the Procurement Act, and we'll come on to that, something called the National Procurement Policy Statement, which effectively requires public bodies like yours to consider how procurement can improve economic, social and environmental well-being. So there's the three key pillars, and if you was a Welsh school, you'd add cultural into that as well. So the Welsh have an added pillar to that. So for schools and trusts, this isn't just compliance, it's about opportunity. It's about asking, and as I said earlier, if you're going to be spending money anyway, which you have to do, how can it also benefit the environment, the local community, social outcomes, etc., well-being and all those things. There is an art to this, and this is what we'll cover. So next slide, please, Victoria. I was going to say Chris, but that seems a long while ago now, doesn't it? So sustainability focuses on environmental responsibility. So sustainability, sometimes we get a bit confused between what's social value and sustainability. Well, sustainability focuses on the environmental aspects, environmental responsibility and long-term resource management. So in schools, this might include things like reducing carbon emissions. You may have a target. You may be part of a larger group that has a target. Minimizing waste, sustainable food sourcing, which has become very popular in terms of catering provision lately, energy efficient equipment, ethical supply chains, and again that has become quite to the fore at the moment. We think of things like modern slavery in certain sectors that has a proclivity towards that. So again, ethical supply chain is very important. So increasingly, sustainability sits within a broader what we call an ESG framework, so environmental, social, and governance. Many schools and trusts, and you are probably working towards things like carbon reduction or improved ESG outcomes, which could be aligned with some of the UK net zero ambitions. But procurement has a central role in achieving that, and this is the power of procurement. So the key message here is if sustainability is part of your strategic plan, it also needs to be part of your procurement strategy. Next slide, please, Victoria. So if again, not many trusts and schools have a procurement strategy, but certainly, this is something that should feature part of it if you do, or a broader strategy. So you, as schools and trusts, are actually uniquely positioned within particularly the communities. As I said earlier, you are anchor institutions. You are at the heart of the community. I dropped my kids off at school today. It's World Book Day yesterday, but the kids went dressed up today, and you could just see the whole community comes together. Everyone's dressed. It's brilliant. I didn't dress up, sadly. I would have dressed up. But yeah, lovely to see. And so you are an anchor institution. You are right at the heart. You're also a major local employer in some cases, particularly where you're a multi-academy trust within a local area, and therefore potentially significant local spenders as well. So your procurement decisions can directly influence things like local economies, local environmental outcomes, and supplier behaviour. And there are three key benefits to you as a school and a trust. So you've got reputation and community trust. So parents, stakeholders are increasingly caring about sustainability and ethics. So it's being seen to be a leader in that area. Long-term financial efficiency, sustainable choices often do reduce waste, energy costs often do save money. There is a misnomer around, well, sustainability costs more. Actually, in the long term, it can cost less. And alignment with things like educational values. So it's about teaching young people, it's about teaching your pupils and students about responsibility, good citizenship, and procurement should reflect those same principles. So social value shouldn't be an add-on, it should be core and central to your procurement plan and strategy and strengthen governance and strategic leadership. So underpinning this is actually a requirement around the National Procurement Policy Statement, often shortened to something called the NPPS. Are we on that slide? Sorry, Victoria. Are we all right to? So the National Procurement Policy Statement is something that is, there we go, is almost a sibling to the Procurement Act. So the Procurement Act itself, and this is regarding what you have to consider, what you have to do over certain thresholds of procurement, doesn't actually mention a lot about social value. And the reason for that is because it's condensed within what's called the National Procurement Policy Statement. So it's a policy outcome. So the NPPS, the National Procurement Policy Statement, is now fully in force under the Procurement Act. So whenever a procurement falls within the remit of the Act, if it's over this threshold where you have to follow the full requirements of the Act, which as a school and a trust, as a contracting authority in the public sector, you will, then you must, and these are the words, have regard to the National Procurement Policy Statement. And that means you must actively consider its objectives when planning, running, and managing a procurement. And so, therefore, not simply being aware of the requirements of the National Procurement Policy Statement and the social value will no longer cut it. You have to evidence you've had regard to it. So there are three key pillars with this: driving economic growth, and this is about using public procurement to support wider economic benefits. And we've just learned around schools being central in certain categories of spend to local providers, and that could be things like grounds maintenance, it could be things like repairs and maintenance services, it could be local contractors, etc. It encourages you to think about how procurement activities can help small medium enterprises foster entrepreneurship and support innovation, and it places a strong emphasis on job quality, fair pay, good working conditions, and opportunities for people to progress. All good stuff, you would think. So it's not just about buying well, it's about creating the right economic environment through what you buy. Delivering social and economic value, as which we've just discussed, is aligning procurement with national priorities such as community benefit, well-being, and environmental responsibility. So thinking about how your procurement can drive social or local outcomes, and importantly, how suppliers are managing risks like things like bribery, fraud, corruption, modern slavery, as well as environmental objectives. So that sits within this objective. So things like suppliers' sustainability practices should inform your decisions. And there is a third element slightly to a side, which is about building commercial capability. So the National Procurement Policy Statement recognises that strong outcomes rely on strong internal capability. And it's about applying best commercial practice, using good tools, processes, templates, making sure that you, as procurers, have the right training and skills. Now, the challenge for you and the education sector is it's very unusual to have a dedicated procurement professional in a trust or a school setting. So unfortunately, folks, it does mean that you need to gem up, as we would say here, on the National Procurement Policy Statement and making sure that you feel confident that you've got reasonable skills. Next slide, please. So on that, we can look at a few practical examples. So social value should not just appear at the tender stage. I always have a little bit of a cry when I come across a tender that has only just thought about, or an afterthought, when it comes to social value. It needs embedding from the start. Pre-procurement is the most important part of the procurement. It's the part where you can have the most influence over the outcomes, for good or ill, of any procurement. So it's about identifying social, environmental objectives up front. It's about engaging the right people, the right stakeholders to ask those questions. And it's about including those sustainability or social value requirements in the specs. So it's about asking, what impact do we want this contract to have beyond delivering what it's meant to deliver? And this is crucial, is it proportionate and relevant to the subject matter of the contract? Two key words. Because if what you're asking is way over the bar in terms of the value of the contract and the type of services or goods been delivered, then that would be disproportionate and irrelevant. So you have to be very careful, because there has been challenges in the past where things have been asked as added value but not been core to the subject matter of the contract. So that's really crucial. At tender stage, it's about, again, making sure that you can allocate weighting to social value criteria. This is becoming increasingly popular. 10, potentially 20%, whatever you feel is appropriate. Again, it's got to be proportionate and relevant, but ensuring you have clear questions around, it could be anything to do with social value, but relevant to the subject matter of contracts are things like local employment, environmental policy, supply chain transparency. And then when you come to evaluate, it's just good practice stuff. So scoring suppliers about against those measurable commitments. And that could be things like carbon reduction, community engagement, apprenticeship provision, environmental certifications, all manner of things. And then when you come to contract management, and this is where many procurers do fall short, they let and forget, as Nathan says, but commitments must be monitored. So it's about requesting evidence, tracking delivery, and reporting impact. And there is some fantastic examples been delivered through the education sector, through procurement at the moment. So education buying, we did an audit later last year, in autumn time, with a number of cleaning and catering providers that have been used by trusts and schools up and down the country through education buying. And some of the fantastic outcomes around social value were reported, and really good examples. So it's not complicated. Some examples of questions you might want to ask. So things like, what actions are you taking to reduce carbon emissions? It's quite an open question. Do you source locally, or how will you support the local economy in the delivery of this contract? Again, it might not be, there are difficulties in saying you must be a local provider, but what you can say is, how will you support the local economy? Or we'll buy our raw materials from a local merchant, or whatever. So, there's good examples there. How do you support workforce well-being and equality? Can you provide apprenticeships or school engagement activities? Can you do a classroom talk? Can you do an assembly? How will you support the curriculum of the school? Do you hold environmental accreditations? Quite a simple one. Doesn't need to be complex, and a lot of people are fearful of asking questions and not knowing really how to score them. But be clear questions, define the scoring, which you should do anyway. And it's about things like measurable commitments. If you're asking for something, is it measurable? Can it be delivered? There is tools out there like the Social Value Portal, which does provide structured measurement models. But remember, even simple structured scoring is better than none. So it's very straightforward. And a lot of organisations, a lot of schools are allocated maybe 5-10% weight into social value, and that's good to see. Again, in terms of local providers, local suppliers do often offer strong social value benefits, obviously including supporting the local economy, reduced transport emissions, stronger community links, greater accountability. Obviously, fairness and compliance, however, remain essential. So you can't inadvertently specify local providers, but you can put in measures and social value questions around how it will support the local economy. Making tender documents clear and accessible is a way of helping to support local SMEs bidding, avoid unnecessary complexity, and this is a requirement again under the Procurement Act, breaking contracts into smaller lots where possible. So does it have to be delivered by a single provider? Obviously, there are advantages and disadvantages to all of that, but this is why we need to think about all of this at that pre-procurement stage. So the potential of all of those widens participation without compromising compliance, and ultimately compliance is the real requirement for you to obviously compliance with the Procurement Act and your procurement policies. And then lastly, procurement does sit well within governance or social value procurement. So strong ESG alignment demonstrates that you as a school, as a trust, have responsible leadership, you're aware of risk management, you've got financial prudence, and you've got accountability to the local community. So we're seeing that trust boards increasingly expect transparency around impact. And so procurement reporting can include things like social value commitments delivered. And like I say, we did an audit last year and that was brilliant, and some really good outcomes recorded, or environmental improvements achieved, or how much you're spending in the local economy, etc. It all strengthens strategic procurement oversight and public confidence. So hopefully that's given a bit of a wraparound as to social value. The main message I would say is it doesn't need to be complicated. Many folks are scared about, how do we ask for social value? Sometimes it can just be one question. How will you support, the curriculum of the school? What can you do to support the local community when delivering this contract? And you may be surprised that a lot of providers and suppliers are actually already doing something, or we'll sponsor your school's football team, or we'll sponsor some school trips, or You know, there's lots of things that can be done. It doesn't need to be, you know, vast. It doesn't need to be huge. It can be just something straightforward and simple, but it's about seeing procurement as an opportunity, not just we need to get a contract awarded and be compliant. It's seeing it as an opportunity. So on that, thinking of opportunities, Victoria, what solutions does Education Buying have available to our good friends and colleagues out there?
Thank you, Nathan. Yeah, so to help you embed all of everything that Nathan has talked about this morning, you can utilise our dynamic purchasing systems, shortened to DPS, and framework agreements, which do ensure that suppliers meet those environmental and ethical standards. It aligns with the Procurement Act 2023, the sustainability and social value requirements, and DPSs allow new suppliers with eco-friendly solutions to join throughout the contract. And it also supports your group buying for affordable, sustainable products and services. So you may be wondering, how can you access all these great DPSs and frameworks? Well, all you have to do is register on our portal today. So hopefully the link to our portal, our website, will be pasted in the chat for you. And this will give you access to tender templates, supplier networks, a contracts register, so you can keep track of all your contracts when they're coming up for renewal, and also expert resources to help you along the way. So yeah, so do please register if you're not already registered with us to benefit from all of those. We're also going to have a poll question coming up on your screen. So this is a really useful one for us to understand where you're at. So many of our frameworks already embed social value and sustainability criteria during supplier evaluation, which means schools like yourselves can access pre-vetted suppliers while still meeting your procurement objectives. So which procurement areas would you most like support with to ensure social value and sustainability are included in your tenders? So we have then listed the categories that we have a framework or DPS in. I'll just give you a second to vote.
So just to reiterate, one of the great advantages, particularly of the catering, cleaning, accountancy, audit, payroll, HR, and MIS, FMS, and budgeting, is that they're dynamic purchasing systems. What this means is that we can invite local smaller providers at any point to join that if you were to use those solutions. So if you have a incumbent provider, or if you have a local provider that you have in mind, they would be subjected to obviously pre-vetting. They've got to meet minimum standards around policy, safeguarding, data protection, health and safety. You know, sustainability is on there as well. But the great advantage is it gives them an opportunity to bid, and that's one of the great advantages. And we've seen some really good local provision successful through these dynamic purchasing systems for many schools and trusts.
So if you've enjoyed today's webinar, just to let you know that we also do have training, which is only £79 per session, when you attend, you'll get straightforward advice you can use straight away. So Nathan's very good at talking at a level where there's no jargon. It's obviously expert led by Nathan.
It's very kind of you, Victoria.
And it's tailored to schools and trusts. So key topics covered are the Procurement Act 2023 and compliance. We also have contract management and supplier due diligence, and also a key one following the Procurement Act has been around procurement policy and getting those all up to date. So during that we do have live questions and answers. and myself and Nathan do obviously understand all your challenges around those, and we do provide
Live and breathe.
resources to take away, and templates and checklists.
I wouldn't be able to say which is my favourite one of these, Victoria. I think that it's like choosing between the children. They're favourites at different points of time, you know, depending on how they're behaving. But yes, I think certainly we've got one next week for the Procurement Act. It's just over a year since that came in. So if you've not really got to grips with the Procurement Act and the requirements, highly recommend that. Shortly followed by procurement policy. Again, if you've not looked at your procurement policy for a while, it's highly probable it will be out of date as a result of the Procurement Act that came in last February. So again, that's something, and we're seeing a lot of interest around procurement policy at the minute. And then contract management, as I said, is the classic let and forget. Not many people do that well, so this is a really good session on how can you deal with those niggles and issues around contract management. What does good contract management look like? So highly thrilling, and I promise to make them really exciting and not dull in the slightest, because procurement is exciting. We put the fun in procurement, don't we, Victoria?
We try to. So thank you very much for joining us this morning, and I do hope you found it useful, and I do hope you have a good, productive rest of the day and a nice weekend. And hopefully that's...
let's hope for some sunshine, shall we? I need to get out in the garden. It's want to get the grass cut, but I don't know whether we can or not. Well, we'll see. I might be pushing my luck there.
You leave yours long for the bees, don't you, though?
True, yes. Yeah, that's a good point, yeah. Thank you, folks. Yeah,
cheers,
lovely to see you. Have a good day.